talk a little bit about your military career, but at the same time, tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, my dad was a chemical engineer. My mother taught school down in Levant, one-room class school. I had 3 children, all boys. 2 of us are still alive. My one surviving brother is a PhD of something, some type of English literature thing.
Yep.
Both my parents are naturally deceased. I never knew my either grandfather. They were gone before I was born. And that's about the extent of the family.
When were you born? What's your date of birth?
November 24th, 1937.
So November 24th, 1937. And you born in the area here?
Born at General Hospital.
Okay, Jamestown. And then you worked through the public school system. And
graduated from Bemis Point High School. We both did. I had 2 brothers, one of which is alive, one is not. That's the extent of my family there.
And what did you graduate then from? Would have been known as Bemis Point High School at the time?
Bemis Point Central.
Bemis Point Central. What year?
1955.
So the Korea War had wound down. And were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted right out of high school and went into boot camp and then went to a what they call an A school in the Navy, a basic technical school.
Where did you go to boot camp?
Bainbridge. Bainbridge, Maryland. A few weeks of foolishness, more or less.
Never heard that description before.
I was quite rebellious at the time, so it didn't go smoothly, but
Oh, really?
I made it through.
How so? You're rebellious, and what was the reaction?
From the Navy,
Yeah.
they didn't like it.
Did you find yourself spending a little extraordinary time on KP duty?
One time, and then that was it. I smartened up. I stayed right at Bainbridge for the A school.
Okay.
I don't remember how long that was, 9 months or something. And then I was transferred to a submarine tender in New London, Connecticut.
Now, was that something you wanted, or it just sort of happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
They gave us a choice leaving boot camp where you wanted to go, and I chose submarines.
Why?
I don't know. Just appealed to me, I guess.
I mean, that's sort of a unique part of the Navy, just to...
It is, yes. Yeah. It's different. Different setup altogether.
So you're off to New England now and getting serious about submarine school. What was unique about it? I mean, what surprised you?
Well, I never went to submarine school. I'm one of the very, very few that never went and made the submarines. I was taken straight from the tender to Nautilus.
That's got to be horribly unusual.
That's very unusual.
I would think that there would have been a long waiting list.
That had to be approved pretty high level to.
I would have thought that there'd
to
be
do that.
a long list of guys wanting to volunteer for it. No.
Well, the chief in my workstation on Nautilus had spent some time at the shop on the tender talking to us, and he asked if anybody wanted to go to the Nautilus, and I was the only one that showed any interest. So we talked for quite a few times, and finally he came back one day and he says, "We got you." So
what did that mean? You're assigned to the USS Nautilus, which has a hull number SSN 571. Did you know much about it? I mean,
oh yes, yes.
So it was.
My specialty in the Navy is what they call fire control,
Okay.
which is weapons control.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was mechanical computers
Mm-hmm.
in those days. And what the tender's job was to do maintenance on the submarines. So I've been aboard it many times. When the Nautilus went into commission, the entire crew, from the mess boy to the captain, spent 2 years in Idaho at the reactor center there learning about the reactor, whether they were going to be associated with it or not once on the boat. I was, I think, the second person to be transferred in to replace one of the original crew members. So when I came aboard, everybody was a former crew member,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not received very well.
Really?
Oh, they were very clannish, extremely.
Well, you hadn't gone to sub school either, so you didn't have that bond.
That probably part of it. I never thought of that, but that's probably true.
Yeah.
So, did they shun you? Or was there how did that manifest itself?
You just weren't one of the in crew
Yeah.
type of thing. Of course, I was junior man aboard, almost,
Mm-hmm.
so that would affect it too.
Right.
And then my chief petty officer, the one that got me on there, he was somewhat of an oddball. He was a photographer, has done many things for National Geographic
Mm-hmm.
while in the Navy and after he retired. And he was kind of shunned by the crew also. So
And you were seen as part of his crew.
I think I stayed in his shadow.
Yeah.
Wow, what a unique reception.
How many crew members did they have at that point?
Total crew, I think, was 98, probably 7 or 8 officers, so say 90 men enlisted.
And at that time, the commanding officer was Wilkinson.
Yes.
Tell me about him, Dennis Wilkinson.
Don't know anything about him other than what I've read.
Yeah.
I met the man, of course, one time.
Mm-hmm.
I never went to sea with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was replaced before we went to sea.
Right.
So I really know nothing about him firsthand. Been in early '57.
Okay.
Had the Nautilus been to sea at all before you came aboard?
Oh yes,
Oh,
oh
it
yes.
had been. Oh,
For several years.
oh, okay.
The tape. Construction began in 1952 and the boat was launched in January 1954, attended by Mamie Eisenhower. It was commissioned the following September in the United States Navy. The Nautilus was delivered to the Navy in 1955. And so that's just a little bit of a backdrop. And then you're become part of the crew in 1957.
And uniquely, we were not based at the submarine base, which is there.
Yeah.
We were at the electric boat company that did the actual building of the Nautilus.
So you're actually stationed at a non-military location.
Correct.
Interesting. So essentially the manufacturer.
Right. Ultra secure,
Yeah.
non-Navy member.
Was it difficult to even, there's a lot of security?
A lot of security. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There was no monkey business there. It's down the river, probably 2 miles from the actual sub base,
Mm-hmm.
and it's completely isolated with security fencing and guards, both on the water side and the land side. It was a very secure area.
You're in the sub itself, and where are you quartered? Just kind of give me a sense of it all.
In the very forward part of it, the torpedo room,
Yeah.
there was bunks for probably 20 sailors there. And that was where I lived.
Were they what they call hot bunks, where you were sharing a bunk with a...
No.
No. Okay.
Occasionally that occurred, but only when we had company riding with us for some reason.
Yeah.
Everybody had their own bunk.
So by comparison to World War II subs, you were probably a little bit,
No comparison whatsoever.
you were a luxury city.
A pup tent to this room is the
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah.
There's no sense of being in a sub when you're on it, really,
Really?
in the nuclear subs, no. Except for the maze of pipes and cables and stuff.
Off to England, essentially.
hmm
Was there a sense that once you're there, you're in port, I mean, I assume at some point you're in port, there had to be a huge curiosity about this nuclear sub.
Unbelievable reception when we pulled in there. It was raining, cats and dogs, and we're coming in and there's high banks. And you're probably 3-4 miles out and we're looking at the land and it looks like bushes or reeds or something. It turns out to be people packed shoulder to shoulder, thousands of them, waiting to see that boat come in. It was just amazing.
And what port was that you were going to?
Portsmouth.
Portsmouth.
The British Navy, did they come and kind of
Oh yeah,
inspect?
oh yeah, it's quite a to-do.
Yeah.
And then parties from my boat went to visit several of their boats, which was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How did their boats differ from the Nautilus?
old, very old.
Probably World War II vintage?
World War II, we had one new boat that was I forget what they called it. The propulsion unit was steam, but it was made by some weird process, and I can't recall what it was. In the engine room, there were pipes probably 4 feet in diameter, and they came together, and that's where you walk through. And the crew members told us those were red hot when they were
Yeah.
running. I
The
never,
Germans had a system where they, I think it was hydrogen peroxide. They
Mhm.
split the two pieces apart and
Yep.
the oxygen went one way and the hydrogen went the other.
hmm
That boat could,
tricky.
that boat could go something like 20 miles an hour underwater,
hmm
which was phenomenal back in 1935 or so. But hydrogen peroxide, of course, is,
Very tricky stuff.
yeah, it's very dangerous.
Then we left for a joint operation with the British Navy,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how long that lasted, a week or 10 days or something. And then we were going on a special operation that actually turned out to be to the North Pole.
Mm.
But the crew was not aware of it until we left England.
So, but once you left England, you now are advised. How were you advised? Did they give you kind of a communique, or just something over the?
Captain got on the main speaker and just told us,
That you're heading for?
we're going to try the North Pole.
Oh my gosh. Was there trepidation at all? What, did you get any sense within the crew that we're doing something that no person has ever done?
I didn't notice any, no.
Yeah. So it was just a mission. And the first one, you didn't get there, did you?
No,
No.
no. We had a little problem. We had two civilians riding us. I can't think of their names. PhD of ice was one. I forget what the actual term is, but he was a PhD. Waldo somebody and his sidekick, and he had some upward facing sonar
Mm.
that he'd fabricated and they installed to look at the ice from underneath, of course. So we started in, once we got under the pack ice, we would ride along till we saw a bright spot above, and then we'd stop and slowly come up to see if it was open. And a couple times they came up and it wasn't open, and then they found one they thought was. So they came up, and it was about 6 feet of crystal clear ice.
Mm.
And we bent the periscope like that.
Someone had some explaining to do on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, those things happen.
Yeah.
So then we went back down and went to Scotland to get the periscope replaced. And we pulled into Rothesay, Scotland, and they had taken the tender that I was originally on, and it met us there, which was kind of an emergency trip for them. I remember hearing about it. They hadn't been underway in 20 years,
My golly.
and they made them go over and be ready for us.
Huh.
Of course, nobody was supposed to know what happened to the scope. That was a little exciting.
So the scope gets fixed. How long were you on base there?
Don't know, a week or so.
Yeah.
That's
Were you,
what-
I'm just curious. So you're in Scotland, and obviously you docked, you're in dry dock probably, and then you get off the ship or off the submarine and go talk among the natives, be among the natives. Were you sworn to secrecy?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was papers to be signed, I'll tell you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What did that consist of? I just out of curiosity, they give you the do not disclose type document,
Under penalty of. Yes.
penalty of perjury or court martial and everything else.
Mhm.
Wow.
About as stiff as it gets.
Yeah. So you're out of there, spend a week in Scotland, and then reboard and go?
And we tried again, and we could not get through. We came to where the ice in the bottom came together too much to get through.
Mhm.
So then we went back to New London.
Then there was, they refer to this, and you're part of this, called Operation Sunshine. Operation Sunshine was what it was called. And Operation Sunshine, in response to the nuclear ICBM threat posed by Sputnik at that time, President Eisenhower ordered the U.S. Navy to attempt a submarine transit of the North Pole to gain credibility to the soon-to-come SLBM weapon system. On April 25th, 1958, Nautilus was underway again for the West Coast, now commanded by Commander William Anderson. USN stopping at San Diego, Seattle. She began her history-making polar transit, quote, Operation Sunshine, as she departed the latter port on June 9th, 1958. On June 19th, she entered the
Chukchi Sea.
thank you, but was turned back by deep drift ice in those shallow waters. On 28th June, she arrived at Pearl Harbor to await better conditions. On July 23rd, her wait was over and she set course northward. Remember all that? All sound familiar?
Is that when you flew home? When you were in Hawaii?
From Hawaii.
Okay.
Yep.
Before you went.
Before we made
your
the
final
trip down.
step.
So you're at Pearl Harbor, and this is like in June. So you had about a month off here. So that's when he came home?
You did.
Okay.
They,
Check on you. Were you married at the time?
Yeah, we got married in January of
Oh,
that
okay.
year.
Okay. I wanted to make sure you were still committed.
been quite a few years we've been committed.
Now that we got that straight. So then you come back, and at that time, did you know you're off again to try to?
Mhm.
Okay.
At that time, the crew knew everything.
Yeah. And well, you take it from there.
Well, then we went north again. Had a couple of unsuccessful attempts to get through the straits past Russia, very narrow and very shallow. We could not go through submerged. And we came to the pack ice and we got in there again, I think about 2 days in, I'm not sure. And we had a fire in what's called the lagging on the steam system, which is the insulation around a a steam pipe. And they couldn't find it. They could find the smoke, but they couldn't find the actual fire. And the smoke got extremely thick. And we had guys passing out. And there was, at that time, no means of getting other air into the boat. You're under the ice, and there's not much you can do.
Did they have gas masks available, or?
But there was nothing to plug them into. I mean,
Yeah.
we needed fresh air. Gas mask is not going to do it.
Oh, jeez.
So it became rather desperate, and we finally got back out. Had some scrapes and bruises on the boat time we got out. So then we proceeded to the shipyard at Mare Island. And emergency design came up with an emergency breathing system that they fabricated and installed. First one they'd ever done. So then we made another attempt with our new system and finally made it through.
A little note here, it said navigation beneath the Arctic ice sheet was difficult. Above 85 degrees north, both magnetic compasses and normal gyro compasses became inaccurate.
Correct.
And a special gyro compass built by Sperry Rand was installed shortly before the journey. There was a risk that the submarine would become disoriented beneath the ice and that the crew would have to play longitude roulette. Commander Anderson had considered using torpedoes to blow a hole in the ice that the submarine needed to surface.
To get a look at the stars.
Yeah.
That special gyroscope they put on was out of the nose cone of a Navajo guided missile. It probably doesn't say that, but
No, it does not.
that's where it came from.
So, this is somewhat precarious that's going on here. I mean, you had one attempt, you got a whole oxygen issue. Now you've got a concern about just not knowing really where you are because nothing normal might work.
Once you're at the North Pole, it's like sitting on top of a pencil.
Yeah.
You got to go down, figuratively speaking, but you don't know where you are going down. You don't know which is east, west, and north. You got north fine, but
Yeah. Yikes. Was there any, did you ever sense any trepidation among the crew members? I mean, you're underwater. You are underwater.
no. If you have trepidations about being enclosed, you're not going to be on a submarine. No, that's submarines in general are pretty laid back, I think, more so than surface ships. It's not the fast attack submarines, which is what I've always been on, are very much, I'd say, non-military. They're not yes sir, no sir type living. It's more laid back. It's a very friendly environment, really.
I'm reading a commendation here to you, Bob, to Robert C. Scott, Fire Control Technician, U.S. Navy, USS Nautilus, with heartfelt appreciation of your superb contributions. Talk about the Nautilus, which made the first transpolar voyage cruising 1,830 nautical miles under ice from the Pacific to the Atlantic, becoming also the first ship in history to reach the North Pole. Did you pause when you kind of got to that point and simply, did you simply, somebody recognize that we are where we are? It's like planting a flag on the top of the ice pack. Was there any sense of that on the boat?
Actually, we never slowed down. The captain came on and said, "North Pole, mark," and that was it. The off crew was sleeping. It
Just
wasn't
another day in the sub.
every other day. Once we got there, one thing I remembered, a young man went clear up in the bow of the boat in between the torpedo tubes and slept that night, and so he could be the first man at the North Pole.
Well, why not? You know?
Why not?
Yeah, good for him. That's good old
I don't remember his
American
name though.
ingenuity. I like that. Well, hopefully he signed some autograph someplace that I'm the first.
Well, we had a little tight spot coming out the other side, but just thick ice we had to squeeze underneath, but no real problems. As soon as we got out and they made radio contact, we learned that the captain was going to leave us. They sent a helicopter out from Halifax, picked him up off the boat. That was a little risky. I was on deck for that. And then he was flown to Washington. The XO took over as commanding officer.
Was there any reason other than just this was sort of a
Report to the president.
okay?
Yeah.
So he got special disciplines, got a special limo all the way.
All the way up.
Yeah. So how did that happen? I mean, they're out there. You're in the. We were in the Berings. Where were you at the time when you got out on the other side? Where were you?
North Atlantic.
North Atlantic. And so literally you surface and the helicopter comes up and he's got to climb a rope and.
First, they had to go over and we tried to put a inflatable raft in, and it was just too rough for that. So they took him right off the deck. And he was soaked time he got in that helicopter. As I remember, his bag was so heavy from water that they had to throw a line out to pull it up. He couldn't carry it.
Because this was all 1958. This is all in the light of what's going on with Russia, Khrushchev, Sputnik. Were you in the service kind of sensitized to that sort of race that was going on? That sort of,
Well, I don't know where it comes in the timeline, but I was in France when the first Sputnik went up. Because I remember somebody said something to me like, "The Russians got you there, Yank."
They did.
Yep, they did.
Going under the ice had to send quite a message to the Russians too.
I would imagine it did, yes,
Probably shook them up a little bit.
because that was right on their doorstep
Oh, yeah.
all the way.
You completed Operation Sunshine. This historic adventure. Where do you go from there?
We head to New London.
Military base?
No, we ended up in New York Harbor for a grand parade. Jan, my parents came down for that.
So I'm visualizing you all up deck and waving. And
Quite a few of us were up there.
so how was your emotion about that? I mean, that's not your everyday event from a guy from Chautauqua County.
You're talking about a 20-year-old with attitude, so it wasn't anything real special to me.
Well, then you get this salute. I mean, here's the Nautilus. Here's something historic. And go through New York, and then where do you end up?
I assume back to New London. I don't really remember. Pretty sure we did.
Now, did you stay with the Nautilus for a period of time after that?
I stayed until I got out of the Navy in September of '58.
Yeah.
So you were in the Navy how many years then?
2.5, something like that.
Oh.
Then I was out for
You went back.
till '63, and I went back in.
did you stay after that?
till 1980.
Oh. What was your highest rank you had in the Navy?
E8.
Oh, that's a good rank. All the time on aboard submarines?
All,
Most of the time?
most of the time, or on the sub base.
Yeah, okay.
I did some teaching on the sub base.
What's the funniest story you can tell us about your experience in the Navy?
Yeah, I'll give you something funny.
Good.
When I went back in '63, then I was assigned to the USS Scorpion, which was in the yards in,
That would have been a World War II sub, right?
no, that was a new one.
Okay.
It was in the yards in Charleston. And we were not living aboard because it was complete refueling of it. Just a terrible mess. We were living in the barracks. And the offices were on the bottom and the living quarters on top. And one day the engineer was having a rant on something. I don't know what had happened, but he was chewing the engineering people out. And he left and slammed the door, mad. And they stood there for a minute, and then they started laughing. And they went and got his little foreign English car of some kind. And they picked it up and stuck it in a little alcove in the hallway. And it fit like that.
Of course, you had nothing to do with this, right?
I didn't, because I wasn't an engineer, but that's the funniest thing I think I can remember.
So how did you get the car, how did you get the vehicle out?
Carefully.
He had to apologize
Oh, we did, to get it out.
because they weren't going to do it. They thought it was hilarious, and he didn't see the funny side of it at all.
Oh, that's amazing.
That is funny, though.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
He didn't. The other officers did. And the only other funny thing I can think of is we had this was after we'd been at sea for a long time on Scorpion. We had an engineering officer that was absolutely hated. Nobody liked him. The officers didn't like him. The crew didn't like him. And when he was transferred, the captain did a very strange thing. He called the crew's quarters on the pier, everybody, non-dress uniforms. And he said, the guy's first name was Paul, the officer. He says, "Paul, we have an award to give you." And Paul knew something was coming, and he couldn't refuse it, so he stood there at attention, and Williamson went on with a long spiel about his super service and how much everybody liked him, everything, and then he called the senior chief in the engineering department to present the award. And he had a big box all wrapped up in ribbon. He walked up and gave it to him, and Paul says, thank you. And the commanding officer said, "Open it." "Oh, there's no need, open it." So he opens it. It's a Mickey Mouse watch.
Oh.
He stood there shaking and slammed it on the ground and walked away. I thought that was funny.
Well, I bet everybody did except him, obviously. You were going to talk about the Russians later on here, and I suspect we're probably in that timeline where all of a sudden the Cold War is real. It's very real.
It's very real. I assume one of these days a lot of these operations that we were involved in will be made public. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But everything we did was top secret. Again, all kinds of papers to be signed and threats made and so forth. But that was the most interesting time I've ever spent naturally were involved with the Russians, and there's quite a bit more to it than the public understands at the time. Thank goodness they had very inferior equipment. We were far superior to them. There was 3 boats on the East Coast and I think 4 on the West Coast. One was each on patrol in the Atlantic and the Pacific, as close to Russia as you could get. It was for 3 months at a time. We'd be gone. And then we'd be replaced. There was never a time when there wasn't a boat on station up there. Yes, quite interesting. It was 4 or 5 spies that rode us every trip, Russian speaking. And they would be in the radio room the whole time we were up there, radio room and sonar room. And we did a lot of data gathering.
Yeah.
They became quite friendly with the crew. They'd eat with us and joke with us, and we learned quite a few things about the Russians. That crew that rode us, they were strictly on board for the radio traffic. Our secondary job was to find everything we could about their submarines. Each submarine is a unique sound. We can identify any sub they've got by name by listening to it. And I'm sure they can do the same to us, but our job was to get as close as we could and get these sound bits from each boat and then try to identify the boat. They knew exactly where we were most of the time. And if they could have sunk us, they would have. No question.
Yeah. So they want to essentially, and you same way, you know, I'm sure they were data gatherings in their own way, but didn't want to necessarily turn it into an international event.
They would have gladly sunk us if they could.
Yeah. Now, what did you have on board that would have, if anything, to sort of defend yourself?
Torpedoes
Yeah.
would have been it, but we were so much faster and our sonar was so much better that they very seldom really got the drop on us.
I was reading again in my source of all knowledge about the fact that the Nautilus really ended up being somewhat retired because the hull and the sail of the Nautilus vibrated sufficiently that sonar became ineffective at more than 4 knots, as noise generation is extremely undesirable in submarines. This made the vessel vulnerable to sonar detection. Lessons learned from that problem were applied to later nuclear submarines. Do you get a sense of that? That perhaps that was a problem with the Nautilus? Is it?
At the time, they knew it was a problem. Yes.
Yeah.
But you're talking, at that time, the Russians had nothing even close to being able to detect it. We didn't know this till we actually discovered it, but they would go to sea with a crew on a submarine. They'd operate for X number of days. They would surface, shut everything off, and just sit there for a week. And all of a sudden they'd reactivate and go back to doing what they're doing.
What was the purpose of that?
I have no idea. But it gave us a marvelous time to photograph everything on the underside and listen to all the like the refrigeration machinery and the water pumps and the distillers.
Do you feel like through that, the sonar, this is interesting, sonar listening process and understanding, could you reverse engineer their subs? I mean, could you take that knowledge and sort of...
You wouldn't even have to reverse it. You'd just have to go back 50 years
Yeah,
in our stuff and listen to it, and it'd be pretty similar.
yeah, so crude.
They were bad at engineering, terribly noisy. Propellers are one of the biggest noisemakers. I can't tell you the propeller on a modern submarine, the tolerances are in the tens of a thousandth of an inch on the propeller,
Yeah.
which is 20 feet across,
So the noise level would be very, very
right?
minimal.
Here you are, this is a 2022, we're talking here about your experiences in the late 50s. Do you get a sense of the historical context that you were part of?
Not really. I mean, it's standard evolution. Things get better and better as time goes on. I mean, the new submarines we've got now are incomparable to what I was on.
You know, I'm looking at this and I'm reading how a very select few received commendations, which you have here framed, and most importantly, framed and for the camera, we'll take a picture of this later, is a citation from the President of the United States to those select few who were members of that crew, which was less than 100. Does this get you?
That is the only unit citation ever issued in peacetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, that got to me.
And the Presidential Unit Citation ribbon with special clasp in the form of the golden N is authorized. And you're one of them. One of less than 100 people that got that.
I'm probably one of the few left alive,
Yeah.
I would guess.
And it reads, again for the camera, for outstanding achievement in completing the first voyage in history across the top of the world by cruising under the Arctic ice cap from the Bering Strait to the Greenland Sea. During the period July 22nd, 1958 to August 5th, 1958, the USS Nautilus, the world's first atomic-powered ship, added to her list of historic achievements by crossing the Arctic Ocean from the Bering Sea to the Greenland Sea, passing submerged beneath the geographic North Pole. This voyage opens the possibility of a new commercial seaway, a northwest passage between the major oceans of the world. Nuclear-powered cargo submarines may, in the future, use this route to the advantage of world trade.
You got out of the Navy in 1980. What did you do after you got out of the Navy?
I went to work for Phillips Lighting in Warren, Pennsylvania,
Oh, yeah.
and then they moved the plant to Mexico, and I didn't go. And then I went to work for the Warren County Commissioners as the Warren County Maintenance Director. And then I quit.
So you lived in Warren for a little while then?
No,
No?
lived where we have always lived since I've been back here.
Oh, really? Oh,
I live pretty close to the Pennsylvania line, so
yeah.
it was an easy commute.
So let's get focused here. You're in New York City. You're feted by all of this, and then now there's pictures of you, of not you, but of the submariners with stars in their eyes. Did you guys get involved with a whole lot of celebrity
Not
attention
that,
while you were in New York?
not that I'm aware of.
Oh, so this gobs live in luxury on Nautilus. This is not my scrapbook. This is yours.
I think there's some PR stuff going on there.
Did you remember? You were there, right? When
Yeah.
So what was your sense? I mean, was your husband out there?
I don't know. really, I don't think at that time that I realized how it was, you know, I mean, how important it was and how, I don't know, I can't think of the word I want to use. I don't know, I just,
Bemis sailor gets greetings. Scott on Nautilus visited by kin. I assume you're part of the kin group. Admiral Rickover came on board. Do you remember that? Were you there at the time?
I've met Admiral Rickover many times. I played poker with Admiral Rickover.
really?
Well, let's talk about him. This is a serious, big-time guy.
He is a crusty old sucker, I'll tell you.
Well, tell me more about Admiral Hyman Rickover. He's the father.
Very small statured man, extremely gruff, has no time for frivolities
Does
at
he cheat
all.
at poker?
No, but he was very good at it.
Didn't have to cheat.
He was very good. One minute he'd be a stickler for something, and the next minute he'd ignore things. I don't know. He was aboard a lot. His favorite trick was to come down the pier at 10 o'clock at night in civilian clothes, just wandering along to see what the topside watch would do, to see what the duty officer would do when he was alerted to the fact that he was there. He was prone to do that. I've seen him do it several times.
So he was sort of on surveillance of himself. I mean, he was checking everybody out, huh?
I guess you could say that, yeah.
Did he like to be treated as a celebrity?
I never noticed that, really.
He wasn't well liked, was he?
The submarine service liked him, I believe. The rest of the Navy, I don't think did, because he railroaded a lot of things through that took away from what the carrier people wanted and the battleship people, and he was a slick politician. He got his way.
Is there a reflection on perhaps the accomplishments that having a nuclear-powered sub of which you were a member, kind of leads to its legacy today?
I don't feel anything special about it. I'm glad I was there. I'm glad I saw it. But I'll have to say it doesn't compare to my Scorpion experiences in any way, shape, or form.
What was so special about your Scorpion experiences?
Things I can't talk about.
Oh.
But it would have been Cold War related, I suspect, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, there's bound to be some of this get declassified one of these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time.
Well, it is well known that modern day submariners have the ability to tap into underwater cables. So
That was one of them.
yeah,
That didn't involve me in any way, but
I
that type of operation, yes.
What's the question we should be asking you?
I'm pleased to have this stuff shown, and it should be preserved, I think.
you got off the Scorpion just before it.
And yeah, I didn't mention that. Scorpion is one of 2 nuclear submarines that the U.S. has lost.
I didn't know that.
That's public knowledge.
Yeah.
I left the Scorpion to go to school in Great Lakes with my family. And I'd finished the school and was back in New London. And the Scorpion went down. I'd say 8 months.
Did it go down the Pacific or the Atlantic?
Atlantic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They know where it is. They found it. They've given 2 different ideas of what caused it. I don't know.
Well, What was the reaction, because you would have been on the base at that time when they lost it. What was the reaction on the base? Now they lost, something really,
Quite a lot of reaction, yeah.
Suffer, I'm sure.
Quite serious, yeah.
Well, with the Thresher, there was some talk that it might have been one of the torpedoes circling around, no?
No, the Thresher, on their test dive, they sprang a leak. And they attempted to stop it and couldn't. So the commanding officer gave the order to blow the ballast tanks.
Yeah.
The ballast tank valves were frozen shut.
Holy shit.
They discovered afterwards. And they had no means of doing anything.
right.
But it would have been a quick death for the people too, right? Not like the Russians.
Well, I don't know how many seconds it took to crush the boat, but I bet they weren't pleasant, knowing it's coming.
Yeah.
But the Scorpion, we had been in the yards, like I said, when I went aboard. And we operated for several years, and we were back in the electric boat for something. And they had a diver down doing something on the outside of the hull. And he come up and he said, there's a hole in the hull. And they said, the superstructure or the pressure hull? Pressure hull. He said, I can stick my fist in it. So they scrambled around and finally found the other side of it, in the inside. There was a wooden plug driven in from the inside.
What?
And we'd been to sea for years with that plug in there.
Someone's got some explaining to do on that one.
Some serious skedaddling with the yard about that, I'll tell you. Why that didn't blow out, nobody can say. Just in there, the pressure of the being driven in, holding it. But the cause of it going down, they say they developed a leak that came in and hit one of the main electrical panels. And at the pressure that it was coming in, it would have actually sliced that panel open and lost power. I don't know if that's the real reason or not. But that was kind of a sad time for me. I knew everybody, I think, except 6 people.
We'd be gone with no communication,
Yeah.
none. So if anything happened, we're on our own.
Yeah.
If my family died, I would not have known it.
So
They do not notify you.
we found out maybe a day
Day
or two ahead of when they were coming in. That was it.
If she'd have died, I'd have known
Yeah,
the day we surfaced to come back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Holy jeez.
So how did it affect the family at all? I mean, he's gone for a long time. I mean, really incommunicado.
We got along really good because everybody around us was Navy. We lived in a community where everybody was, and in fact, the people next door, her husband was on a carrier that was gone for a year, and she had two little kids. So
It's a lot harder for the wives than it is the
we
men.
made do.
Yeah.
We
Tell you that.
help each other out. You know, at that time, going to the commissary, you weren't allowed to take the kids. So you had to make arrangements with your neighbor. I had 2 neighbors and we would change off. One of us would babysit the kids and the other 2 would go shopping, and it was, I said, you hear all the complaints about Navy wives now, and I said, we never complained. We just lived, and it was good, really.
I'm sure Jan is hearing things today that we've never talked about, my time on the boat.